I'm going to go ahead and run this. I have a Blazor application. I should have had this running. So right now, all it does is you got a bunch of these spots where it shows the database tables, and so all the CRUD is there, and I can edit stuff if I wanted to, and it works. So update that. So that's kind of an idea of, this table right here. I'm going to show you the component that manages this table here. But first, let me just go over what I have in this project. So here's my database project. It's just in this Blazor WASM, ASP.NET hosted application where you got the client, server, and shared projects. So you see I got a bunch of tables here. So that's a lot of CRUD to do. And to me, I don't have an issue putting a controller for each of those tables. I'm only getting started here. So to make things easier, I've created this interface that's a generic interface. You can see here. It's generic and does all your basic CRUD. And on the server project, I have a Dapper repository that implements that interface and does all of the expected stuff that a repository would do. And of course the controllers implement that, or directly inject that Dapper repository and does all the things that an API controller does. So far so good. So we got the client here. Now I watched a couple episodes of Blazor Train, and Carl did this API repository on the front end, and I've modified it a little bit. I cleaned up this. This is the cool thing that you can pass in filters, and it does all the sorts and everything. So I've extracted that into a service that does a little bit more of the stuff here. But anyway, all these things implement that original generic repository. So when I'm working with the maintainers, like I showed that table with maintainer 1 and maintainer 2, here is the component. So here's the UI, and then here's the code behind. So I'm injecting this maintenance manager, and that is in my services, platforms, maintainers. Here's the maintenance manager. That inherits that API, generic API repository, but I have to define the type on this manager. So when I'm working in this component and I call get all async, I have to know the type that it's retrieving, and it's maintainer in this case because that's what this is, this component. But every one of these tables is going to have the same configuration, this component here, the edit component, and the only things different aside from the UI portion of it, they all have this same get all async, map it to the view models, and then throw it up on the UI. I'm thinking there's got to be a way to make this generic as well, but the problem is the interface here, or the implementation of that interface, you got to have the type. What I'm wanting to do is have a basic component here to where maybe I pass in a string and I can create a manager that is a generic manager. I'm not exactly sure how it's supposed to be done or a good idea to do it, but I'm doing a whole lot of copying and pasting and then find and replace, because if you look at all these components, they're all the same aside from, look at that, aside from the types that they're getting in and the UI, which I understand the columns are going to be different and all that, but the logic to retrieve that data, it seems like there's got to be a better way to do it than what I'm doing it here, because I have a lot more tables to go, and I'm just looking for like a one over the world. How should it be done? Because when Carl shows it on Blazor Train, it works great, because guess what? He's only got one table or two tables. So when he makes those services, you know, he makes this service right here. You pass in a couple and there's only, you know, one or two of those to go. But when I have, like I showed you, I have all of these tables. I'm going to have one of these for every table. And then for every component, I'm going to have, you know, several of these components for each one of those tables. And it just seems like there's got to be a generic way of doing that. And I feel stupid for not knowing it, but I figured I would throw this out on YouTube and get some ideas. So thanks in advance for any help.